Please. It's good to be with you today. It's good to preach in this place. I am Warren Swenson, son of this place. And this is, if you can believe it, I can't, the first time in 12 years of affiliation with this church that I have been able to assume this pulpit. So I would like to say to you all, and especially to Father Rector, from the bottom of my heart, it is about time. It really is a delight to be with you today, to talk with you today. I think I'll just move on. There was an ancient Hebrew law. You can find it in Deuteronomy. If a man dies childless, then the deceased man's brother is to marry his widow. The practice was intended to ensure that the dead man's name would be passed down. You see, the firstborn son of the new union would be, by legal fiction, the dead man's son and heir. It was a practice intended to provide for the widow, who would have been particularly socially and economically vulnerable without the family's support. So this is the teaching that the Sadducees are referring to when they question Jesus in today's gospel. This is long before you understand our modern notion of marriage, rooted in mutual joy and help and support. It was meant to be somewhat of a practical custom about financial and familial stability, keeping the property in the family and producing progeny to maintain it. It's not a very romantic notion, but it was the notion of the day, and it is a perfect scenario for the Sadducees to bring up, because you see, they do not believe in the resurrection. And apparently they don't think anybody else should either. So they approach Jesus and they say, "Rabbi, Moses wrote for us in the law that if a man's brother dies, leaving a wife but no children, then the man shall marry the widow and raise up children for his brother." And Jesus says, "Yes, I'm familiar." And so one of the Sadducees says, "Okay, so hypothetically here, let's just say there are, 7 brothers. The first one gets married, but he dies before he and his wife can have any kids. So according to the law, the second brother marries the widow, but then he dies before they have any children. So the third brother marries the same woman, and you're never going to believe this, Jesus. He drops dead the very next morning. So now it's the fourth brother's responsibility to marry the woman, and he is just as nervous as he can be, but what can he do? All the way down the aisle, he's praying, "Please, God, let me live." And the fifth brother is there in the second row with the family, and he is praying, "Please, God, let him live." But in fact, they both end up dead. And so does the sixth brother, and unfortunately, Jesus, the seventh brother, dies as well. All dead, no children, a widow, 7 times over. Well, long story short, finally, this poor woman dies too. Now, Jesus, you say there's a resurrection. So whose wife will the woman be in the resurrection? She married all of them. They are not asking the question earnestly, you understand. They do not want to learn from what Jesus has to say. They are settled in their beliefs, and they want to trip Jesus up in his, or at least cast some doubt about what he's saying among the members of the crowd of listeners. I know it's difficult, but you could probably, if you really try hard, imagine a scenario in which someone questions an opponent not for the purpose of listening to them or learning from them, but in hopes that they might be able to use what they say against them. Of course, it doesn't work on Jesus. Jesus always lands on his feet. He is asked a trick question, but he provides a genuine answer. His answer is twofold. First, Jesus says, your question isn't really applicable. You see, you're getting this age and the age to come mixed up. Those who belong to this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are considered worthy of a place in that age and in the resurrection of the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage. Jesus says, marriage that you're talking about is a this age thing. People get married and have children so there will be someone to carry on the family name, to take care of the farm, to look after them in their old age, to remember them when they've gone. That sort of thing. But those made worthy of the age to come, they will not be able to die anymore, so there will be no reason for marriage. Children of the resurrection don't have to worry about passing down their name or their property because they cannot die anymore. This age is passing away, but that age is fixed, permanent. And second, Jesus says, look at the Bible. You quote Moses to me. Well, God said to Moses out of the burning bush, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And since God is the God of the living, then to God all of them are living, even though they have died, ergo resurrection. Jesus is shrewd. He displays great rhetorical acumen. It's a wonderful answer. He has proven with both sound reasoning and scriptural evidence that yes, there is a resurrection. And I suppose it probably would have been, was a great moment of revelation for those in the crowd. And it probably would be for us too. But we already knew that, didn't we? It's a funny gospel lesson today because it teaches us something that we came here already knowing. We're 21st century Christians, not first century Sadducees. We hear today's gospel in full knowledge of Jesus' resurrection, of Jesus' triumph over death. We don't need any convincing about the doctrine of resurrection. We know Jesus' resurrection, that miracle of miracles. I was in church last Easter, weren't you? In Sewanee, we distributed communion to 1,200 people in 17 minutes. Talk about a miracle. We sang on that same day, Jesus Christ is risen today. We heard that wonderful story that is the center of our faith. The women came, the tomb was empty. He is not here, but has risen. The theme of the day was hard to miss. God raised Jesus from the dead. It is a settled question for the Christian of this age. No convincing required. Of that much, we can be certain. But you know, as I was walking around in the world this week, it began to dawn on me. Christians may know the resurrection of Jesus, but we don't always do a very good job living like it's true. We're a little too fixated on practices of sin and death. As I was walking in the world this week, I met a man who was terribly cynical. I won't use any names because this is pretty sensitive stuff. But he had this overall attitude of despair that affected his whole demeanor. He said to me in the midst of our conversation, "It's us versus them." No two ways about it. It's us versus them. You've got to know who your enemies are, because hate is the only motivator we've got left. As I was walking around in the world this week, I ran into another person, again, no name. He said, "I'll be fine." And I said, "Come again?" He said, "I'm going to be fine." I said, "Fine with what?" He said, "The economy. I've been saving for years. I'm fine. People just need to put money away for these rainy days. I've been doing that since I was 22. Now I'm retired, and the price of milk doesn't make any difference to me." As I was walking around in the world this week, I crossed paths with a person who asked me, "Did you see the election results yesterday?" I said, "Yes, I did." She said, "Finally." She said, "Finally, there is a reason to hope, to be happy again." It's not even something, let me say this differently, it even affects preachers like me. I was in the supermarket earlier this week, last week, and I see a woman spending the last of those SNAP benefits, the ones that have expired. And I saw her with her cart, and do you know what was in her cart right there in front of me at the She had Dr. Pepper and Cheetos. And I said, I don't really think that's the kind of stuff she should be buying with that money. I even thought there in that line, I thought, I think I just might be a little more responsible, a little better than her. Christians, we may know Jesus' resurrection, but we don't always do a very good job living like it's true. We all too often go looking for our salvation in hatred, in resentment, in self-righteousness. But if we do that, then our salvation will be just as finicky and weak as we are. If we go around looking for our salvation in our bank accounts or our financial future, then we cannot take our salvation with us when we go. And if we go around pretending that our salvation is tied up in the result of an election, then our salvation will be term limited. If our salvation is in the government, salvation will shut down. Now, I'm not saying you can't disagree with people. I'm not saying that you can't dislike or distrust someone. Skepticism can be a healthy and useful thing. Be wise as serpents, innocent as doves, and all that. I'm not saying that you can't enjoy the fruits of your labor or rest comfortably, having prepared for your financial future. Material comforts are not altogether unethical. I'm not saying that you can't have strong political opinions or campaign or vote. I think you should. I'm not saying that you can't be down or depressed about the state of the world. Sane people are. But I am saying that as hard as it is to remember, our salvation does not depend on any of those things. It has already been made sure and certain in the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. Now, not even a preacher like me is naive enough to think that knowledge of that fact magically makes everything better. But as Christians, we have the opportunity to live like it's true. And believe me, that helps. On this side of the resurrection, we know something that the Sadducees didn't. God, through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, has already inaugurated that age to come. For all who are baptized in Christ, resurrection life has already begun. What I'm saying is that resurrection life starts at the font, not at the grave. The moment that you passed through the waters of baptism, your life was changed forever. It did not make everything perfect, but it did bring you into the resurrected life of Christ. You see, because when you pass through the waters of baptism, you're buried with Christ by baptism into his death, so that you may be raised with him to new life. And that starts now. By virtue of our baptism, we share in the death and resurrection of Jesus. That's important, not because it's fire insurance that saves us from burning for eternity. That's important because it has real life implications about how we live our lives now. Friends, that age, the age of resurrection, has already drawn near. Now, don't worry, you can still get married. But Jesus is telling us that, as important as that is, it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that God gives life to the dead. And because we have died in the font, and because we will die to this life at the grave, and because each day we are called to die to sin, that means God gives life to us. That is why our practices of death, our hatred, our resentment, our self-righteousness, our making of monetary and political idols are not the end. They are not the answer. From the depths of our confusion of those things, from the depths of that sin, God raises us to new life. God makes it possible for us to hope for something more and to live like it is already drawing near. God makes it possible for us to hope for something more. Of course, we have to have a little skin in the game. We have to be aware of the next right thing to do. Nobody can do it for us. And that is hard work as we walk around in the world. But that is precisely why we have the grace of God. The grace that was given to us in our baptism. The grace that is renewed in us each time we say our prayers. Each time we hear the word. Each time we chew the bread and sip the wine.